All right, so welcome everyone to this Q&A. Again, I want to welcome everyone to this Q&A. Question came in earlier, and someone wanted me to speak about synagogue services, daily prayers for, let's say, JIT, a Jew in training, or someone who's Jewish for that matter. It doesn't really matter. So there are synagogues that combine Mincha and Maariv together. Right, the afternoon service with the evening service together, meaning that whether it's in the winter, whether it's in summer, the idea is that you have, let's say, the afternoon service sometime, hopefully sometime before sundown, and then shortly after sundown, maybe 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, better 20 minutes later, but probably earlier than that. Then they'll start to pray the evening service. Maybe, the rabbi of the synagogue will speak a little bit or something like that. The question was, that's normally how it works in places that are, let's say they don't have, they're worried about getting a minyan. So since everyone's already there, they're going to pray the afternoon service. Then shortly thereafter, they'll play the evening service. Because the question was, they combine both afternoon and evening prayers into one thing. So I'm not exactly sure what that means. I think what they mean is they do one after the other. They can't do it one at the same time. That wouldn't make any sense, right? In other words, you have the afternoon service, which we call the Mincha service, which constitutes Psalm 145, Ashrei, Shmon Esrei, silent meditation, or Amidah, whatever you want to call it. And that'll be followed by Tachanun, it's penitential prayers. They make you feel like a piece of dirt, unless there are days you don't say them. Let's say, like during the month of Nisan, from now for another week till a week after Shavuos, something like that. There are different times where we don't say it. If let's say there's a circumcision in the synagogue, you wouldn't say it then, or for any number of reasons. But then you say Aleinu, and you say the Aleinu prayer. Now, I'm not sure how you're going to combine this with the evening service. I think probably what the person meant was that you're going to have the evening service right after, right? Probably in between, someone will say Dvar Torah, someone will say words of Torah, whoever it is, or maybe not, maybe they'll just stand around schmoozing or whatever the case is. And then they're going to pray. And then they're going to pray the evening service. So basically what you have is you don't have a combination of afternoon and evening service. Essentially, I guess that's what you would call it. But the reality is, it's not one and the same. In other words, the two separate services. You got the afternoon service. You have a little bit of a break in between, and then you have the evening service, right? You have in the evening service, you have 2 paragraphs before the Shema, you have 2 paragraphs after the Shema, and then you'll say the Shmon Esrei, and then you'll say Aleinu. So they're 2 totally different services where the main part of the service is the Shmon Esrei, the silent meditation, whatever you want to call it, and at night, the main part is also saying the Shema. Right? You don't say the Shema in the afternoon, because the Torah says you say the Shema at night and in the morning, right? Say it in the morning and in the evening. So you say it twice. So there's an overlap. So that I would agree. 100% there's an overlap, but you're not saying it all at once. It may look like it's all at once, but essentially not. There should be a little bit of a break in between. It doesn't necessarily have to be. Let's say for instance, you start praying a little bit before sundown, right? You have an obligation to pray before sundown, right? The afternoon service. Now, some Hasidim will pray even after sundown, which, according to us, you have at least 10 minutes that after sundown when you can pray the afternoon service. But even if a person would do that, okay, right? In other words, really the afternoon service should be prayed earlier. So let's say it's done a little bit early. Let's say it's done 10 minutes before sundown. That means that by the afternoon service, you hit the Shmona Esrei before sundown. You repeat the Shmona Esrei after sundown, most likely, right? You're not going to say Tachanun. You're not allowed to say past sundown. Just throw this out there. You're not allowed to say Tachanun past sundown. You'll say Aleinu. You'll say Kaddish. You'll say Aleinu, and that's it. So then, once the service is done, most likely, now this is probably what they meant. Most likely, it's already dark enough. You can start the evening service, right? Again, it's better to pray the evening service at least 18 minutes, 20 minutes after sundown. Let's say you did it 10 minutes after sundown. So according to many rabbinical authorities, I have to repeat the Shema again. Why? Because it should really be said when there are 3 stars. 3 stars means about 18 to 20 minutes after sundown. If I said it before, I get credit for saying it, but I have to say it at the proper time. Right? So therefore, I have to say the Shema again. Right? Like some people taking Shabbos early because it's very late. So you don't say Sfiras Omer. You don't count the Omer. We're not counting now because we just had Shavuos. But you don't count the Omer until it's dark. Right? So now someone will normally make an announcement and say, don't forget to say the Omer. Right? So when the sun goes down, 20 minutes after sundown, then you can say the Omer. Right? So too by saying the Shema. Right? So if you pray too early, the evening service, you have to go back and say the Shema again. But what could happen over here is that you have the afternoon service. The afternoon service goes into the evening service, meaning that time has gone by, and therefore it's night. It's considered nighttime. So I can pray the evening service. I don't even need a break. I don't even need words of Torah. I don't need to say Devar Torah. Right? I can just say the evening service straight away. So I think that could be that's what they meant. Right? That they combine the afternoon and evening prayer. Right? So that would make sense. In other words, you have the afternoon service right before sundown, then you have the evening service straight away. So that's sort of the combination, even though they're two different prayer services. So I would say that they wanted me to discuss how things, should go or should not go. So I would say, if you don't have to, you should pray the afternoon service earlier. Right? Definitely should be done before sundown. Technically speaking, if you started praying before sundown, and now you hit the Shmona Esrei by sundown, that's, there's an obligation to hit the Shmona Esrei before sundown. If you didn't, okay, you got a few minutes after sundown, basically, about 10 minutes till after sundown, that you can pray the afternoon service. After that, we hold, at least by the Litvish, we hold that you cannot pray later. You can't pray the afternoon service later than that. If you're Hasidic, some people, they pray later. Okay. I don't necessarily have an answer for that. 10 minutes after sundown, that's the leniency. That's the leeway. 10 minutes after sundown is already too late. Really, you should not be praying the afternoon service, at that point. So in the summertime, it's a lot easier because sundown's very late. So if sundown's very late, you got a lot of time to pray the afternoon service. Winter time is more of a problem. Winter time is more of a problem because people work. So people work and sundown, let's say it's 4:30, right? You're not necessarily going to get 10 men in the synagogue to pray because people are working. They're not going to make it back in time, right? So what in some synagogues they'll do is they won't have an afternoon service, right? They'll just have an evening service later when most people are going to be around. It depends, if there are more people around, fine. So they'll have an afternoon service also. But, some places may not have that because, again, people aren't around. So in the winter, I definitely understand it's more of a problem, right? It's definitely more of a problem that the winter, you're going to have more of a problem. And the reason is because sundown is earlier, right? Sundown is a lot earlier. So that I could hear. Either there's not going to be a fixed prayer in some synagogues because no one's going to be around. It's just going to be an evening service. Or you tell me that if there are enough people around, so they'll pray earlier. So winter time's a problem. Winter time, depending where a person lives, could definitely be a problem. Why? Because they don't have people around. And praying is early. Right? So therefore you'd have a problem. You might have a problem. Right? In the summertime, you shouldn't have a problem. The only thing is, if you live in a place where, if you have the afternoon service, let's say earlier, whatever time, and then you're going to have the evening service later, you're worried people won't show up. And if people don't show up, you won't have a minyan. So what some places will do, probably a lot of places, right, depending where you are, unless it's like unless you have a bigger community, so they have, they'll have prayer services many times during the day, so you won't have an issue. But in a place where you don't, so what will they do? So they'll pray the afternoon service and the evening service together. They'll pray one after the other. Why are they going to do that? Because they're afraid. 100% they're afraid they're not going to get 10. They're not going to get 10. And that's going to be a problem because people are going to leave. But again, I would say during the summer, when sundown is later, I don't think you necessarily have to come to the last second, in order to pray. But I think what synagogues are going to do is, they're going to push it as far as they can because then they want it to be dark. And then once it's dark, 15 minutes, let's say, 18 minutes after sundown, or even if they pray a little bit earlier, whatever the case is, they're going to have 10 men there. And then that's not going to be a problem, right? You might have to say the Shema again, okay? But that's probably why. Most likely, that's why they do it. That makes sense. That's why they do it. But the misnomer is that they're combining both, and that you can't have. That doesn't make any sense. And you're not going to have an afternoon and evening service. You're going to put them both together. That doesn't make any sense. So it must be it's one after the other, right? That's what it sounds like. So I would say that again, you don't want to pray too close to sundown, if possible, right? You want to give yourself a little bit of time. And if you did, let's say you got it into the last second, so now you're allowed to repeat the Shemona Esrei even after sundown by the afternoon service. Tachan on these penitential prayers, you won't say. Why are you not going to say it? You don't say it after sundown, right? So that's the only difference, that you wouldn't say it. But Shemona Esrei, you have to start. Let's make clear. You have to start before sundown, right? If you're Hasidic, okay, you got a little more time. If you want to pray exactly at sundown, whatever. The idea is the Chazon Ish, Rav Avram Yishai Karo with the blessed memory, and others held the best time to pray the afternoon services later in the day. Why? Because that's when they gave the sacrifice. That's when the afternoon sacrifice was given. But there are others that pray earlier. Why they pray earlier? Either because they just want to knock it out, they want to get it out of the way so they have the rest of their day. Right? They don't have to wait, they don't have to wait till later. Or they just, just because of their schedule. Now, can a person pray earlier? They can pray earlier. Again, some would say it's better to pray, later during the day because that's when the sacrifice is given. But it depends on the person's schedule, as well. In the winter, again, it's going to be more difficult to pray that much later, right? In other words, sorry. Yeah, if you want to pray that much later, so let's say sundown's 4:30, you're going to start at 4 o'clock, let's say 4:10, maybe you got a better chance of getting more people to come. I don't know, right? Depends on the case again. It's going to depend on the synagogue and what's going on there, et cetera, because during the winter, you're going to have a problem, right? During the winter, 100%, if sundown is early, what are you going to do, right? Most people work. Either they pray on their own, right? They're going to pray on their own, or if they have a place to pray nearby, that's what they'll do. Or Or let's say they have enough people to make a minyan, before sundown. The winter is more of a problem. Summer, I would say much less of a problem because you got a lot more time. But when you're going to have services in the summer, closer to sundown, you're going to make it easier and have it closer to sundown because that's when people are there. So therefore, you're going to have another service. That's what you're going to do. You're going to have another service. You're going to have the evening service right after because that's when most people are there. It's probably after sundown anyway. So it could be, let's say they pray 10 minutes after sundown, which you're allowed to. The problem is you need to say you would need to repeat the Shema again. That's really the only issue. If you waited 20 minutes after sundown, very good. Now someone says, well, that's the only minyan in town. What do I do? So you pray there. So if they pray 10 minutes after sundown, you have to say the Shema again. Right? Or you'd have to count the Omer, which we don't have to worry about now. But for next year, you'd have to count the Omer later. Because you can't count you have to count the Omer when it's sundown. When the 3 starts, at least 20 minutes, 18 minutes after sundown. Right? Now, normally, if you start services 18 minutes after sundown, the evening service, so you're going to get to at least 25, 30 minutes after sundown when you say the Omer. So that's fine. That you don't have a problem. But if you said it too early, so let's say on Shabbos, Friday night, come Friday night, sundown is, 8:30, 9 o'clock, depending in some places. So you're going to pray a lot earlier than that. So if sundown, let's say you see 3 stars at 9 o'clock, you already finished your meal 7:30, so you have to wait. You have to wait to pray the evening service. I mean, technically, if the sun is still shining, technically you could pray the evening service if it's later than an hour and a quarter before sundown. Right? So sundown is 8:30. So you shouldn't pray the evening service at like 7:15. You should pray it later than that. But if you're going to wait anyway, you should wait the right time. But in either case, let's say you prayed at 7:30. Let's say you said the evening service 7:45, whatever it is. Even if it took you 20 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes, still not sundown. So you still can't say the Omer. You got to wait till it's sundown. And the Shema have to repeat. Right? So those are probably the practical differences. And again, if services start before, shortly before sundown, right, the afternoon service, and then comes sundown, you got 10 minutes, 15 minutes after sundown, so you can start praying straight away the evening service, right? So therefore, if you have a combination of the afternoon and evening service, you're doing one after the other. But you just have to know when sundown is. Because if sundown is later and you pray the evening service too early, that means I have to say the Shema again. Right? I'd have to, and I have to say the Omer, which again, not a problem today. So let's say they're worried about getting a minyan. They don't want people to hang around. Sundown is 9:30, let's say. So they pray at 8:30. They pray at 8:45. You're allowed to pray that early, right? But the problem is I have to go back and say the Shema. So hopefully it's done when everybody's there and it's nighttime. Because if it's done too early, then you haven't done anything, right? It's going to be at least an hour and a quarter. You have to say you're allowed to pray technically an hour and a quarter before sundown. Technically, you can pray earlier than that, right? You can pray whatever an hour and a quarter before, but you still have to say the Shema again, right? So hopefully that's not being done. Hopefully the evening service is going to take place after sundown. But let's say it's 10 minutes after sundown, 15 minutes after sundown, you still have to say the Shema again. You have an obligation to say the Shema a second time. If it's done 20 minutes, 18 minutes after sundown, then you don't have a problem. Then you don't have a problem. But some places will pray earlier. Why? They're going to pray earlier because they don't want people to stay. People aren't going to want to stay. Because if you say you're going to hang around for another 45 minutes, people are going to say, come on, I'm busy. I got things to do. Right? I don't want to stay, so you lose the minyan. So what some places will do is they'll pray earlier, and they'll just tell people, okay, you have to say the Shema again. Because that you have to say at night. Right? But it's not a combination. It's not like I'm saying Mincha Maariv at the same time. That you don't have. It's a separation of services. That 100%. That's a separation of services. It's just the question is when. When is the evening service being done? Is it being done when there are 3 stars, 18, 20 minutes after sundown, or is it done earlier? Right? But it can't be done at the same time. That doesn't make any sense. Because once one service is done, again, if it's nighttime, I can start the next service. Not a problem. Right? But that's the reason. That's the reason it's being done. Right? For the sole reason that they want to make sure you're going to have 10 men. That they're going to stay. Because otherwise they wouldn't stay. You got to tell me I got to stay another extra half an hour to pray. Come on. What am I going to do? I'll go nuts. Whatever it is, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for people get people to stay. So that's why they make I guess that's what this person meant. That's why they make a combination. They make a combination of the afternoon and evening service, but it's one after the other. And again, the evening service should be done. I'd say 18 minutes after sundown. If it's done earlier, okay, it's done earlier. You get credit for saying it. You just have to say the Shema again. So that's what I would say. That's what I would say on that. So depending where a person lives, if it's not a big community, that's what a lot of synagogues will do. They'll combine both services. They'll combine both services. In order that, what are you going to have? In order that, they'll have a minyan. Because if you didn't have a minyan, you're going to be stuck, right? You're totally going to be stuck. So that's why they do it. In the winter, it's worse. Why? Very simple, because winter is a lot less time, right? It's much earlier. So if sundown is much earlier, so then you're gonna have to pray earlier. Now let's say, this comes up a lot also. Let's say somebody works, right? Somebody works. They're not gonna make it back in time to pray because they work. They're not gonna make it back in time. So what do? So they have an obligation to pray. Right? If it's a guy, he's got an obligation to pray the afternoon service. Women should also pray the afternoon service if possible. They're not obligated by things that are bound by time, mitzvahs that are bound by time, but they should also pray the afternoon service if possible. For a guy, it's obligatory. That there's nothing to talk about. So for a woman, let's say for a guy, he's got to pray. Now, he's not going to make it to a minyan. He's got nowhere to go. Right? He's not going to make it back and forth. He can't take off time to do it. So what does he do? So what does he do in such a situation? So that person, even if they work, they have to take off time to pray. That's what they have to do. They don't have a choice. Right? So now the question is, okay, a person's at work, going to find a place, obviously a place to pray where there's no, idolatry, whatever it is. But you're only allowed, and I'll just throw this out there because it applies to a lot of other things as well. And that is you'll be only allowed to pray at work on your time. In other words, if you have a break, let's say you got a lunch break for an hour or half an hour, and that's the only break you have. Or let's say you have a couple breaks, doesn't matter. Right? You have a break in the morning, you have a break in the afternoon. We'll make it easy. So if you got a break in the afternoon, part of that time, you're not going to pray anywhere else. You're not going to get there, or it's too early, whatever the case is. So you have to pray there. 100% you have to pray there. But it has to be on your time. Right? Now, this is something, I don't know how much people are necessarily aware, but, a person works, you're on the clock. Doesn't matter. Whatever the hours are, right? You're on the clock. When you're on the clock, the boss owns you. Now, if the boss would say, okay, you don't have much work now, you can check your own personal email. You can do other things, I don't know, play Tetris, I don't know, for a few minutes, whatever it is. I know people still playing Tetris, whatever it is. So then you're allowed to. And that's not a problem. if a person takes personal time, now this is going to be a Torah prohibition. Laws of damages, the laws of wages and all these things, a lot of them Torah prohibitions. So if a person takes off time when they should be working and they're obligated to work, it's not like, okay, you got free time here. You don't have free time. You're on the clock. When you're on the clock, you got to do what the boss wants. You're a slave. You're a slave to the boss at that time. So therefore, you wouldn't be allowed to play Tetris. You wouldn't be allowed to check your own email. You're not allowed to check a text or whatever, right? Because you're not on your time. If you're on your time, it's a different issue. Now, people take some liberties, and they'll say, let's say they want to print something out. I don't know, they got a paper they need to print out, 2 papers, 5 pages, whatever. Are you allowed to print it out at work? Now, if they allow it, and it's a personal thing, okay, right? If they don't allow it, and a person takes the liberty anyway, on the boss's time, you're liable. That's stealing, right? It doesn't matter. It's only 1 page. Someone will say it's 2 pages. It's nothing. They're not going to miss the paper. What's the big deal? Someone will even go as far to say everybody does it. Everybody does it. Yeah, but if you would ask the boss, am I allowed to do such a thing? Right? If you're allowed to do such a thing, what's he going to tell you? Get off your cotton picking head. What do you mean? You're checking your email, you're printing something out. You're not allowed to print something out. Who said you're allowed to print something out? I remember I used to work for a title company. Same thing. If they were lenient, they said, yeah, don't worry about it. You can print it out, whatever. You don't have to do it on your own time. You get something to print it. Whatever the case is, fine. If they don't allow it, regardless of what people do, right? It's where people make a mistake. People think, well, everyone else does it. Well, a lot of people do a lot of things that are forbidden. One of them people are going to say, well, they all speak Lashon Hara, so I'll speak Lashon Hara. Who says you're allowed to? Because people do it doesn't necessarily mean it's permissible. And if it's company policy, then you're not allowed to. You're only allowed to do it on your time, if they allow it at all. Now, some places may be super lenient, and they'll say, yeah, don't worry about it. It's fine. But, you have to know what the policy is. Now, the manager could say, yeah, don't worry about it, it's fine. But really, the boss doesn't allow. So who do you have to listen to? You have to listen to the boss. Manager doesn't have power over here. If the manager has power, and he's calling the shots and whatever, okay. That's a different issue. Well, people will say if everyone else is doing it and it's only 1 page, and what's the big deal? The big deal is you're a thief. That's the big deal. According to the Torah, you're a thief. You checked your email when you shouldn't have. It's very tempting. You're busy doing other busy work. Say, let me just check 1 second, and you go back. So for that split second, however long it was, that's a Torah prohibition. Why? Why? Because you are enslaved over here. I just actually saw something earlier. Was it I think it was yesterday. It was yesterday I saw something where one of the rabbis, was working. Someone was working in a field, and someone greeted him. He wouldn't even greet him back. Why do you want to greet him back? He says he's allowed to, he's allowed to talk. He's there to work. He's a slave to his master, whoever the boss is. So who says he's allowed to say a split second and say hello? Now you might say if the king walked in, maybe it's different. Maybe we say it's different over here because it might be an affront to the king. That might be a little bit different, right? But in general, so there are cases where they refuse to talk. They refuse to do anything outside of their work. Why? Because that would constitute, stealing because you're on the clock. And once you again, and I'm sure this happens a lot, and that people aren't necessarily so careful. And that is, if a person's on the clock and you're working for somebody else, they're expecting you to work. Now, what if a person does? You have no work to do now. You have no work to do. So can I play Tetris? If you have no work to do and it's a slow day, so the boss, what's the boss going to expect? There's no work to be done. So, you can be standing around. I see this a lot. I see this quite a bit where, you get somebody at the store. Someone's working at the store. They're at the cash register. Nobody's there. Nobody's coming to buy anything. So at that split second, no one's coming to buy anything. Are you allowed to look at your watch? Are you allowed to look at your phone or whatever? I travels up north. I see this all the time. I go to a bus station. I wait for a bus. And right in front of me, there's outside they have, they sell all these candies and whatever. So I see someone working behind there. If there's no one there, no one's there asking them anything or whatever. They look around, whatever. They're on their phone. Totally on their phone. Right? So now, if the boss lets, and there's nobody there, and you're doing your job basically, but there's no one, there's no one to check out. There's no one asking any questions, how much this costs or whatever. So question is, would you be allowed to look at your phone? Would you be allowed to answer a text, so to speak? I remember, I used to work for this title company. Someone called me, whatever. I had a whole schmooze, so I clocked out for that 10 minutes, 15 minutes, Or if I didn't clock out, I just added 15 minutes on. Because who says you're allowed to sit there and schmooze while you're on the job? Now, you got to tell me it's an emergency, something, okay. It might be a different issue, right? But when I see people in stores, not that I'm just like noticing this all the time, but, I do happen to notice when there's no one around, they're on their phone. They're on their phone. Whatever they're doing, checking email, doing whatever it is, they're on their phone. Now, if the boss says, when no one's around and everything, you've taken care of everything and whatever, and you're watching the store, fine, then that's not a problem. But if the boss would say, you're there, I don't want to see you on your phone, even if nobody's there, then we'll find another job. Right? You're obligated to me. I don't care if nobody's paying. Nobody's asking you any questions. Right? So you straighten up, you did everything you have to do. Go sit there like like adult. Good SAT word. You sit there like, I don't know, like you got nothing better to do. Fine. But who says you're allowed to be on your phone? Now, again, a lot of people probably be lenient with that. If there's no one around, you've done your job, right? There's nobody around to ask you anything. Fine. Right? Then that shouldn't be a big deal. If you're stuck on your phone or whatever, and there are customers, yeah, that would be a problem. That I would think most people would probably say. Most people would probably say is an issue. But if the boss really doesn't let, and a person does it, that's a total prohibition. You're stealing over here. Because that time you're working, you're obligated. You are an absolute slave to your job. Right? So if that's your job, that's your job. Now, if they tell you, if there's nothing going on, then yeah, you got free reign over here, so to speak. That's one thing. That's one thing. If not, then, a different issue. So, if someone asks, if they allow phone calls, music to listen, that's fine. That's not a problem, right? You're not dealing with customers or whatever, right? So that's fine, right? That wouldn't be an issue. If a person's allowed, they allow you to listen to things, if you're doing, let's say a person's doing mindless work. So you can watch something and do that at the same time as long as you don't mess things up. Fine, right? If the boss allows, then it shouldn't be a problem. Right? A person putting things on shelves. As long as you're putting things on shelves, you can listen to other things. So I don't see why it should be a problem. Definitely shouldn't be an issue. If the boss would say, I don't want you, you're not allowed to take phone calls. I don't want you listening to anything, whatever. I want you to do your job. So then that would be forbidden. Even if it's mindless, doesn't matter. Boss calls the shots. You can call the shot. I remember I worked for a title company. If there was no work, right? Or things were slow, they wanted you to perfect your craft. They don't want you to sit there doing nothing. Obviously, they didn't want to pay you for nothing, right? But what do they want? They wanted you to be able to perfect what you do. Okay, I guess there's somewhat of a limit to that, but okay. They didn't want you just sitting idly by. But again, would it be a problem technically if you're doing work and you do other things? Could you listen to other things? Yeah. As long as it's a job you're not going to mess up at, and you're not going to do something egregious. Obviously, there are certain things you can't do that with, right? But if it's something that, if it's something mindless, you're just putting stuff on shelves or whatever, and you're allowed to do that, then that shouldn't be a problem, right? That shouldn't be a problem. So if the boss is going to sit there and allow phone calls, okay, right? Also not a problem. I don't, question is, is going to allow phone calls ad nauseum for the entire time you're sitting stacking shelves, whatever, and you're on the phone for 3 hours. I don't know, he might mind that, maybe not. If he doesn't mind, then yeah. But again, it's not what I can get away with over here, and this is the mistake people make. It's not what I can get away with. It's you're obligated over here, right? You're stuck in this situation. You're working. So if you're working, you're on the clock. If you're on the clock, the boss owns you. So the boss sets down the rules. Now, if someone else under the boss says, nah, don't worry about it, you'll never get mad about it, you can do it anyway. So that's a problem. Because he's not the authority. If there's a difference of someone, I spoke about this in 13 Principles, class on 13 Principles, about who the authority is and who the wielder of authority is, right? When it comes to the army, who's the authority? Well, God forbid, but who's the authority? The president. He's in charge. He's the one that calls the shots. But if you want a pass to go away from the weekend, you have to go through the sergeant who's above you. He's the one who wields the authority. But the authority is not through him. Who does he get his authority from? His authority comes from the president. Fine. But the president himself is not telling you whether you're going to have a pass for the weekend or not. He's the one where the authority rests. But the one who wields the authority, right, is the person who's in charge. Right? The person who's going to call the shots over here. But if the president would say, we don't allow this, we don't allow that. So again, you're going to have to listen to what he says. The one in charge is not necessarily the one calling the shots. He may tell you, okay, he has to answer to the boss. True. But you have to answer to them. Whoever the manager is, you have to answer to them. And if you get a problem with the manager, you go above the manager, right? If you have to, right? But he's the one that's calling it over here. Problem is, he doesn't have full authority, right? That's where the problem lies. You can say, yeah, don't worry about it, it's fine. But if you heard that the boss says it's forbidden, it doesn't matter what the manager says. What the manager says is irrelevant over here, even though he's the one that wields the power. Right? He's the one that's technically calling the shots. He's your boss. Okay? But even if he's your boss, guess what? If the big boss says, I don't let, and he says, okay, wink, wink, it's okay, that's a problem. You can't listen to him. Because then, in effect, that's stealing. So you'll say, well, it's kind of tricky over here. So again, you got to use common sense. And common sense dictates that you cannot do, unfortunately, what other people do. Just because other people do it and they can do, they can do egregious things and get away with it. That doesn't mean a person should do it, even if they do it or other people do it, right? That's a problem. And that's going to come under a Torah prohibition here. And that's stealing. But the argument someone's going to make is, but other people do it. So now I'm going to tell you a fundamental principle. As my Rebbe would say, go eat kugel. Who cares what other people do? We don't care what other people do. We care what's right. We care what the Torah says. And the Torah says, okay, they're going to say, oh, you're a goody goody. Okay, say what you want. The Torah says I'm not allowed to do it. Period. I'm not allowed to do it. If I'm not allowed to do it, it's forbidden. Other people do it. Other people get away with it. Different things. My Rebbe is very fond of saying, there's a verse in the Torah I think people are aware of, but they should be more aware of it. You know what the verse in the Torah says? The verse in the Torah says, "Davar sheker tirchak." You're not allowed to lie. You have an obligation to stay away from lying. Now, there are certain cases. A person would be allowed to lie, but in general, it's forbidden. Right? So how did this concept come up? Right? So I remember I asked my Rebbe many years ago that there are two lines when a person comes into Israel. There are two lines. One is a line, when you come into the airports, when you go through customs, things that money you have to declare, things you have to declare, things you don't have to declare. Now, it used to be there was a very high tax on electronic goods. Today, it's still you have a high tax on cars, even if you buy them secondhand. You have high tax on certain things. Electronic goods have come way down. But, back in the day, electronic goods were very expensive. So now, what are they looking for? They're looking for people bringing in things, and they're going to sell them. They're going to sell them, make a profit. Now, it's for your own personal usage, right? It's one thing, right? But there's another thing going on over here. You bought something in the States, right? Let's say you bought a mixed master. Here, it'll cost you 3 times the price. You bought it in the States, it's $220, or you bought a huge converter, or whatever the case is. And you bring it in, you go through the line, we don't have anything to declare. Now, technically, you walk through that line, they randomly check people, just to, keep people honest. So if they would check your thing, they would check your bag, they see this. So now you're going to have to come up with an excuse. They say, oh, I brought it home, I'm bringing it back, it's mine. Whatever. I mean, obviously a lie, right? But you can certainly get taxed on it. They can now tax you on it, right? So there's differences of opinion in this case, what you're allowed to do. Why? Because some people are going to say, well, the land of Israel does not have the status of what we call dina d'malchusa dina, the law of the land. Some say the law of the land does not apply to the land of Israel. Everywhere else it does apply. There's a difference of opinion whether it applies in Israel or not. So who says I have to listen to tax authorities in general? Right? Or I have to listen to this rule. Law of the land may not apply, right? But the problem is, what happens if you get caught? So I heard one great rabbi say, some would say there's no law of the land here. Not a problem. I don't have to declare anything. I don't have to say anything. That's not considered lying. Others would say just the opposite. My Rebbe would say there, even though there's no law of the land here, let's say, there's a mitzvah in the Torah not to lie. So you're not allowed to lie. And if you get caught, it's a tremendous desecration of God's name, even though secular people probably do it all the time. And they're not, so even if they get caught, okay, so they got caught, big deal. Maybe they'll find them, maybe they won't. If an ultra-Orthodox Jew gets caught, that's a huge thing. Then they're going to start screaming at them. How could you do such a thing? Why? Because they're going to hold us to a higher standard, which we should be held to. So if that's the case and you get caught, you're in big trouble. You're in big trouble. So my Rebbe would say, don't do it. You're not allowed to do it, even if there's no law of the land over here. Why not? Because you're over Torah prohibition with Davar sheker tirchak. You're not allowed to lie. There's a middle opinion. The middle opinion says, if you know you're not going to get caught, then you're allowed to do it. But who says Murphy's Law? Or I would say Murphy-Stein's Law over here, right? Murphy's Law. You say you're not going to get caught, you're the one who's going to get caught. 300 people can walk through, not a problem. You're the one who gets caught. Can happen. Right? So that middle opinion would say you can't take a chance. 100% you can't take a chance. Not that it's necessarily forbidden. That opinion doesn't necessarily hold it's forbidden. What that opinion holds is you better not get caught. And if there's a chance you get caught, you can't do it. So you got to be careful here. Then we have to be careful. Now, some people would say, come on. They take too much taxes. They do all kinds of things. It's my mitzvah to bring it in and do that. Some people say that. I'm not saying you're making a business out of it. You bought a few items you don't want to declare. Okay. Some people say, come on, is that the end of the world? People are going to say it's not the end of the world. But technically, is it really stealing? You got to declare it. 100% you got to declare it. Now, if you would take a survey, secular, and religious people, take a survey of 1,000 people, right? I'm going to be generous. Take 1,000 people and you ask them, have you ever brought something into the country and not declared it? Guarantee everybody's going to say yes, 100%. But don't you know you have to declare it? And people come up with 1,000 excuses, 1,500 excuses, why it's okay. But the rest of the world does it. Everybody does it. Today's it's probably less of a big deal, right, than it used to be, right? But still, you shouldn't be allowed to do it. Still, you're not allowed to lie. Over here, even if you tell me, Rabbi said, even if you tell me it's the law of the land, it was that you're allowed to lie. But the government is, they don't keep Torah, they do things against the religious, but it's all true. So what? So what? Who gives me the right to lie? Who says I'm allowed to lie over here? So Rabbi said, people forget there's a verse in the Torah, you're not allowed to lie. You're not allowed to lie. Right? So you tell me, but everybody does it. Or most people do it. Okay? Who says you have to be, who says you have to be like everybody else? Nobody says that. Nobody says you got to be like everybody else. Totally not. You have to uphold what the Torah says. It's not a question for, everybody does it. So what do I care what everybody does? They'll have to answer after 120 years, whether God's going to hold it against them. He's not going to hold it against them. That's up to God. We have to do what we need to do. 100% we have to do what we need to do. That's it. Can't make excuses. We're not going to be asked, why weren't you like him? We're going to be asked, why didn't you do what you should have done? And it could be God's going to hold us to a higher standard than to other people. Or if not, he'll say, fine, I'll give you a free pass here. Everybody did it anyway, not really a problem, but depends where you're holding. Depends what the source of your soul is. If you were much greater, even a minor fraction of something wrong could be a desecration of God's name. Could be something very small. For someone else, come on. For someone else, it wouldn't be anything. For this person, this person did something really, really small in the bigger scheme of things. They're going to be held to a much greater liability. Why? Because they're on a higher level. Someone else, it might not be a sin at all, not even by accident. Might be nothing. Someone else might be a huge thing. Over here. Someone asks, very controversial, about the Rebbe being the Lubavitcher Rebbe being the Messiah, or something similar. That the merit of the Rebbe, the Messiah. Isn't this as well sending letters to the grave of the Rebbe really bad? Yes, it is. I mean, that's idolatry. We hold it's idolatry. Now, does every Chabad person believe the Rebbe is the Messiah? No. I'd say it's a small minority, but I think it's more than a small minority right now. Regardless, that's a problem. First of all, sending a letter to someone's dead, that's a little bit of problem. My Rebbe once said, when Rav Shach passed away, he was the Torah giant of the last generation, head of the Yeshiva in Panovich. He told me, tongue in cheek, he said, yeah, don't think people won't send in faxes either. This is by the yeshivas. Not talking about Chabad over here. Not that I necessarily have anything against Chabad. Right? But this is the problem. This is the problem. Some will say that, if you have, let's say, a Chabad shochet, someone who ritual slaughter of meat, and he believes the Rebbe is the Messiah, he can't eat his meat. Idolatry. Now, a lot of rabbinical authorities very much fire against this, hold 100% it's idolatry. Now, I don't think my Rebbe's changed his mind over the years, but he holds for some reason it's not idolatry. Now, again, I'm not exactly sure why. Could be, I don't know, a friend of mine once said he might have a soft spot for Chabad. I'm not exactly sure. But he doesn't hold, as far as I know, I haven't asked him recently, but he doesn't seem to hold that the Rebbe being Messiah is a problem, that it's idolatry. He holds they're just crazy. It's just a crazy ideology, but it's not idolatry. They don't for sure worship him and think, other things. He just thinks they're it's a little bit crazy. It's a crazy ideology. Now, there are other great rabbis disagree, and they say that 100% is idolatry. 100%. If you can't answer amen to their blessings, you can't eat their meat if they shechted it, if they slaughtered it. A huge problem. Huge problem. Again, I don't know if I have anything against Chabad. This is an issue. This 100% is an issue. They say, isn't it really, really bad? Yeah, it is. So how can they do it? You have to ask them. It's a misinterpretation of a Gemara. It says that Mashiach can come from someone that's dead. But Rashi there says someone who has characteristics of somebody that passed away, let's say like the prophet Daniel or somebody else, but not that he's coming back from the dead. Right? It's a misinterpretation of however they interpret it. Right? But it's a misinterpretation. That's one reason. So it's a misinterpretation. Right? But yeah, it's highly problematic. And many rabbinical authorities hold it's idolatry. Right? Nothing to talk about. Right? If you would ask me, I'd also say, he's coming back from the dead, that's idolatry. Or he's not dead, or whatever the case is, that's idolatry. That's exactly what it sounds like. It's kind of a crazy thing. I remember when the Rebbe died, when he passed away, I heard on the radio people were dancing. It was dancing in the streets. It's crazy. I don't have an answer for it. It's wrong. I definitely think it's idolatry. No offense to my Rebbe, I think, I'll go like the majority. I think it sounds like idolatry. Exactly what it sounds like. So, yeah, that's highly problematic. That is definitely highly problematic. I'm not saying anything else about Chabad. I think they do a lot of good work. In general, this is highly problematic. Definitely highly problematic. So, one of the things I'll just throw out there, I don't know what Chabad does with this, but the Gemara says that Rabbi Akiva thought Bar Koziva, or Bar Kokhba, as he was known, was the Messiah. Now, that being said, Rabbi Akiva changed his mind when Bar Kokhba was killed. So the Rambam there says one of the things the Messiah of David cannot do is die. The Messiah of Yosef, there's a difference of opinion, the Gemara and Sukkah, whether the Messiah of Yosef is going to die or not. That's the whole discussion, whether he's going to die or not. The Messiah of David cannot die in the process. Otherwise, it can't be the Messiah. Right? So Rabbi Akiva understood when Bar Kokhba died and was killed, and he thought he was the Messiah, he made a mistake. It comes on the Rambam, and the Rambam says, guess what? You can't die in the process to be the Messiah. Right? You want to be the Messiah of David, you cannot die. So what does Chabad do with that? Don't know. They have to answer that. If you want to tell me he's going to come back and have certain characteristics of someone that died, okay? That's not idolatry. But if you say he's going to come back from the dead, that seems to be idolatry. Right? Definitely seems to be idolatry. So bottom line, the Messiah of David has to do certain things. He has to rebuild the temple. He has to bring in the exiles, right, from outside of Israel. And probably most important for this discussion, he cannot die. Can't die in the process. If he dies in the process, he can't be the Messiah. Certainly can't be our Messiah. Yeah, that's what I would say on that. Someone here points out some followers pray to Rav Nachman. That's also a problem. You can, again, if someone, and this is a little bit hard to fathom, but if somebody goes, and this question comes up a lot, person goes to a gravesite of a righteous person. You're not allowed to pray to them. We don't have intermediaries. You say Tehillim, you say Psalms, and then their merit, you're not praying to them. Praying to them is forbidden. That's idolatry. So if they are praying directly to Rav Nachman, that's a problem. If they're not praying to him, that's a different issue. There are great rabbis that have merits, and through their merit, different things can happen. But you're not praying to them. You're definitely not praying to them. If a person prays to them, that'd be idolatry, right? So if what this person says is true, that some of the followers do that of Rav Nachman, that'd be no different. That'd be the same thing. That 100% would be idolatry. Doesn't matter who the Rebbe is. If you're praying to somebody, that's an intermediary. We don't have intermediaries. If you're praying through their merits, not to them, not to may their merit protect us. Something like that, that's okay. Why is it okay? Because you're not praying to them. You're not using them as an intermediary. If you use them as an intermediary, that would be a problem. That 100% would be idolatry. So whoever that is, if someone would use, rabbi, rebbe, somebody as an intermediary, in that way praying to them, that's idolatry. Right? That 100% would be forbidden. That 100% would be forbidden. Somebody mentions that if you go through Jewish history, a lot of difficulty. So people are praying for the Messiah to come. Yeah, but you need a lot of faith. Things get worse before they get better. Let's keep in mind. But okay, during a lot of these times, many claims of false messiahs. Yeah. The last one, Shabtai Tzvi, almost destroyed the Jewish people. Almost totally destroyed the Jewish people. Right? A lot of false messiahs been around. True. Why does trauma and hardship lead to false messiah claims? I would say that, we live in a generation where everyone agrees we're in the era of the Messiah coming. Everyone would agree. A lot of signs. So a lot of people think Messiah is going to come, everything's going to be easy. Going to make my life easier. Not to worry about my bank account, other things. In different ways. Unless you're whole like the Rambam. That's no difference between this world and that world. When the Messiah comes. But okay. You have to remember, a third of the world is going to be saved. A third of the world is going to get destroyed. A third of the world is going to be somewhere in between. It's going to be injured. See if they survive, they don't survive. There's going to be a lot of upheaval. Going to be a lot of death. Right? It's brought down. It's going to take 8 months. It's going to be a war, which it sounds like going to take 8 months to clean off all the bodies. Bury all the bodies. 8 months. If it's a nuclear war, well, not much dust to clean up, is there? If that would be the case. Because the Vilna Gaon said, students said the name of the Vilna Gaon more than 250 years ago, If there's going to be a war, it's a whole question if there will be or not. Most would probably agree there will be this great war. But if there's going to be a war, it's going to take 12 minutes. Said the students of the Vilna Gaon in the name of the Vilna Gaon. That was before missiles. Obviously talking nuclear. So the question is, you get something like that, who's really going to be around? But people think, we're hoping that if we keep Torah mitzvahs to the best of our ability, we're going to be around. And hopefully that's the case. But there are going to be a lot of tests. What's the biggest test going to be when the Messiah, in the era of the Messiah coming? Emunah. Faith in God. Because you're going to see things get a lot worse. And that the miracles that are going to happen when the Messiah comes are going to be pale in comparison, right? Sorry, what happened in Egypt is going to be pale in comparison to what's going to happen when the Messiah comes. There's going to be a lot of bloodshed. But you're going to need a lot of faith over here, right? So it's going to be a lot of payback. God's going to pay back all the nations what they did against the Jews. Europe going to get totally demolished. All the countries close to Israel are going to get totally demolished because of all that Jewish blood around. Totally going to get demolished, but it's going to need a lot of faith during these times. You got to say, well, how much worse can it get? Oh, it can get a lot worse. People now, except what's going on necessarily in the Ukraine and maybe some other places, people are just trying to survive right now. Prices going through the roof, gas prices, food prices, people struggling all over with everything going on. Money is going to be a major test. But in general, our faith and how God runs the world is going to be a major test. So the question is, people think, Messiah's going to come. Why does it come through such hardship? Well, why should it come so easy? The Gemara says if we do what we're supposed to do, then it should be easy. Then there shouldn't be any suffering. Or what's God going to do? He's going to put up a king like Haman, like Mr. Haman himself, going to put up a king, and we're going to have to repent that way. It can go that way, go the hard way, go the easy way. How does it look the way it's going to go right now? So he's saying, boss, it's going to go the hard way. It's going to go the hard way over here. It's the way it looks. It's going to get a heck of a lot worse before it gets better. So what's the only thing we have to hold on to? It's the fact that God runs the world. That's what we have to hold on to. That we have to repeat many, many, many times during the day. God, you're the one in charge. Yeah, I messed up with this, I messed up with that, but you're the one in charge. You're the one calling the shots. I definitely have to be better. That's no question, but you're the one calling the shots. So, don't think, one thing to keep in mind, when the Messiah comes, the Gemara in Sukkah says, the angel of death is going to be out of business. He's on his last legs. So the last thing he wants to do is have the Messiah come, because that means he's done. That the angel of death, the evil inclination, gets destroyed. You think he's going to make it easy? Not going to make it easy. And he knows he's on his last leg. So he's going to make life as difficult as possible in a lot of different ways. So when the Messiah comes, the angel of death, the evil inclination, whatever you want to call him, Mr. S, is on his last legs. You think he's going to make it easy? He ain't going to make it easy. He's going to grind us. He's going to grind the world in general to make sure the Messiah doesn't come. He can't stop it. He can delay it. Right? But he knows he's on his last legs. So therefore, he's going to make life real hard. So that's one possible reason why, you have false Messiah claim, what it could do. Certainly what it could do. Does Hashem bring false messiahs to help give the Jewish people a little hope? No. False messiahs have to be killed. Right? Torah tells me in the book of Deuteronomy, false messiah, even if he does miracles, you kill him. We don't make any bones about it. You kill him. Why? Why is the punishment so severe? Because it's going to create havoc. He's going to make you put faith in something that's false. And when you do that, you take God out of the picture and God's going to get real angry. God doesn't like false gods. He hates false gods. He hates idolatry. So God is going to get really ticked off and bring more havoc. Right? So therefore, it's not about giving us a little bit of hope. It's just the opposite. If they're false messiahs and they do miracles, what's that going to do? It's going to cause God's anger to be even greater. The last false messiah that we had, again, read up a little bit about it, but what happened in the time of Shabtai Tzvi, almost single-handedly destroyed the Jewish people. Almost destroyed us. We don't need false messiahs. We don't want false messiahs. You knock them out because of the danger that they have. It's not about, it's going to give you a little bit of help through the trauma, just the opposite. It's going to make the trauma worse. It's going to make it much worse. Because think all these Chabad people, let's say. They are God-fearing, they keep Shabbos, they keep kosher, whatever. But let's say for argument's sake, what they're doing is idolatry, believing that the Rebbe is the Messiah. You don't think God's ire could be tremendously great, saying, what were you believing in flesh and blood and not me? And using him as an intermediary doesn't mean he's not a great person. He's not God. He's certainly not God over here. Again, if I were playing God, I put on my funny George Burns glasses, my funny mustache. And I'd say, are you kidding? Okay, the Rebbe was great. We're not saying not, did a lot of great things. You think he created the world? You think he can play with the Leviathan, make him jump through hoops? Read the last 2 chapters of the book of Job. You think he can do all these things? He can't. Tell him to get up. Right? If I were God, again, no offense, to Lubavitcher Rebbe or anybody, you think you're the Messiah? Okay, get up. Let's go. Let's go for a walk. Come on, move. Do something. Wave. Go like this. Scratch your head. Oh, you know why I can't do that? Because you don't have a soul in your body. You're dead. You don't have power. You have no power over here. Right? So, I could be a little bit cruel if I wanted to be. And I'd say, come on. You really think he's the Messiah? Let's see. Let me see him do something. Let me see him do a backflip. Again, this could be anybody. Not here, God forbid, picking on the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Right? He's got no power. He can't do anything. Can't even scratch his cheek. I mean, we don't see it, but whatever. He can't scratch his cheek. Can't do anything. So if that were me, you're believing in someone who's dead? You're worshiping someone basically who's dead? You take me out of the picture? Oh, that could be a big payback. Because if we really hold that to idolatry, which it seems to be, how many times does the Torah tell me he hates idolatry? A lot. You don't think there'll be some payback for that? If I'm playing God, any of these people, unless you hold like my Rebbe and you say they're just crazy. They're really, it's not really idolatry, but other people are not that way. So if they are idolatrous, they're causing a tremendous bad name for the rest of us, putting us in danger. We don't believe in it. We're against it. Okay, that doesn't mean it doesn't put the Jewish people in danger. Not just them, could put everybody in danger. So that's a problem. It's a problem for us. So you have to remember, one person, 2 people, 3 people, could do something wrong. It affects everybody. Right? And let's say, a person, part of their body hurts. It's not just one part of the body hurts. The whole body hurts. Jewish people are one unit. We mentioned many times. We're all intertwined. If we're all intertwined and they're busy doing messianic things that are forbidden, it'd be serious payback. You say, well, why doesn't God just pay them back? Because we're all intertwined over here. Now, it could be God could say, hey, how come you didn't protest against it? How come you come out against it? Well, I didn't want to, they wouldn't listen, this, that. Could be. People have to speak out against it. Again, I'm not saying he's not a great person. Be greater than me in 10 lifetimes. I don't think there's any question about that. That doesn't mean he's the Messiah. He can't be. According to us, he certainly can't be. Because he's dead. Everyone agrees he's dead. right? That could be a serious problem. You know, you can follow in his ways. He did great things. I'm not saying not. The problem is someone here points out they can't die. Like the Rambam says, you cannot die in the process. If you die in the process, you can't be the Messiah. Could you have character traits from somebody that's dead? Yes. Does that mean it's the person dies coming back to life? No. Doesn't mean that. Again, however they learn it. Rabbi just says it's crazy. It's a crazy idea. Other people go much further than that, which I think they should. It is problematic. Again, I don't have a personal vendetta. I think Chabad does a lot of good work. They do tremendous work. This is a problem. This is a problem. There's no way to get around it. It doesn't matter who the rabbi is if they worship him as an intermediary. That's a problem. Like someone will say, my Rebbe walks into a room, everyone stands up. It's like the parting of the Red Sea. Say, oh, that's idolatry. No, that's respect. What are they respecting? They're respecting the Torah that he knows. If you take out the Torah from the ark, what does everybody do? They stand up. They show respect for the Torah. Right? So the Gemara says a number of times, these stupid Babylonians, they'll stand up for a Sefer Torah, but they won't stand up for somebody who resembles the Torah, who exemplifies what the Torah says. That's a fool. Right? Is that idol worship? No, that's respect. Yeah, you know what the idol worship is? That people worship the Torah that they wish they had that he knows. That's not idol worship. That's wishing you had that Torah knowledge. But that's what you're respecting. You're not worshiping the person. You're worshiping what he knows. It's a whole different thing. But if you're worshiping the person himself as an intermediary, yeah, that's a different thing. That's a whole different thing. And as we said before, you can't die in the process. You die in the process, you're out. 100%. Someone asked, will Mr. S be punished in the future? It's not going to be. He's going to be punished. He's going to get destroyed. He did his job. He's a messenger. He's an angel. Right? Does his job very well. Doesn't need me to agree. Does a great job of what he does. He's got a time limit. Been around for a while, but he's got a time limit. And he knows he's got a time limit. And during that time limit, he's done. Once that time limit is over, that's it. It's over. What do they say in Boston? It's over. Yeah. Someone asked, Elijah would also be the Messiah. No. Elijah cannot be the Messiah. The Torah, the prophets say he's going to announce the coming of the Messiah. He's not going to be the Messiah himself. Definitely not going to be the Messiah himself. Even if he's anointed, doesn't matter. Right? He's got to come from the line of King David, but the prophets say, I have to find the exact quote, but the prophets say that he will announce the coming of the Messiah. It's one of his jobs. That's what he'll do. So if that's true, then he can't be the Messiah. Someone asks, who created all the blessings as well as Berkas HaMazon? Berkas HaMazon, different parts of it were done by different people. One second, let me just look up one thing here. Let me see here. So, what do we have? We have the first paragraph of Berkas HaMazon, grace after meals when you ate bread, is that there are four paragraphs, right? One is the first paragraph, praises God who sustains the world. Then you have the blessing of the land, the blessing of the land, Bonei Yerushalayim, protect and rebuild Jerusalem, and then the general praise and thanks for God, right? So So we're told that Moshe Rabbeinu was the one who composed it when the manna fell in the desert. Joshua composed the blessing of the land when the people entered the land of Israel. David and King Solomon composed Bonei Yerushalayim, the building up of the land of Jerusalem, different stages of the building of the city. The rabbis at Yavne composed the blessing of Atova Meti, the general praise and thanks for God, in response to the burial of the martyrs of Beitar. Those are the four main paragraphs. And the Shmona Esrei was done by, I think, by the men of the Great Assembly. Double check that. Let me see here 1 second. So, according to the Gemara, seems like Rabbi Gamliel undertook to codify the main service, so to speak. And Rabbi Shimon HaPakui added the blessings, again, the blessings for the Shmona Esrei itself. And others say it was it was the men of the Great Assembly that put them together. So it could be that really it was some of the men of the Great Assembly, but they fell into disuse, and then Rabbi Shimon Gamliel or Rabbi Gamliel came and reinstituted them. So that's what I would say about that. And some say again, Rabbi Shimon HaPakui put them together, put the blessings together. Someone points out that Christians teach Mr. S, the Satan, whatever you want to call him, he rules the world. Well, they mistranslate Isaiah chapter 45, verse 7, which says that God created evil. So for them, they got a problem because they believe evil happens because of Mr. S. They have a mistranslation. So you have to give them a real translation of what the Torah says. So according to them, evil happens because of Mr. S. And we believe that evil happens because people can choose evil or not. But simple thing is, you can ask them, show them a proper translation of Isaiah chapter 45, verse 7, which basically states that God created evil. Not that he is evil and he's a fallen angel. We don't believe in fallen angels. Right? Fallen angels have no place in Torah. Right? You go through Derech Hashem. Derech Hashem speaks about, Ramchal speaks about spiritual forces and how spiritual forces work. And again, according to Kabbalah, basically, they have no free will. No forces in this world, not animals, not plants, not spiritual forces, none of them have free will. So the onus is on them, really, to say, where do you see, according to the Torah, forget the New Testament, according to the Torah, where do you see that angels have free will? So you have to watch I have a video on Tanakh Talk we did. Do angels have free will? So I went through I had a Freemason that was like dogging me for a while and basically brought all these quotes from Tanakh showing that angels have free will. So I went through a bunch of them, and I would have basically had to been stoned and smashed, whatever, to come up with such a crazy explanation. Totally crazy explanation. It didn't make any sense because, as we said before, as I'm doing the next few weeks on crazy things said in the Talmud against non-Jews, 90% or 99%, if you look at these sources, it's all about context. So yeah, if you want to take things out of context, very good. you want to cherry pick and say, oh, see, it says this. Okay, that's not what it means. Right? Now, they may not like the explanations that the rabbis give or whatever, but like they cherry pick and take totally things out of context. So same thing. They have to show proof. They have to show proof why that is according to the Torah. Now, again, according to Kabbalah, it's nothing talking about. Right? It's what the Ramchal brings down. In the way of God, in Derech Hashem, he says clear. Nothing has free will. Otherwise, you take God out of the picture. It means God has no power. If these things have free will, the mistake is people will say, well, God, God's not all powerful. These things act outside of God. That goes against the Rambam's 13 principles. The very beginning, 13 principles. God is absolute. Nothing has power outside of it. The Rambam says either you believe in God or you believe in idolatry. Nothing in between. Right? Because if these other things have power, that means God's not absolute. It means morality is relative. Things can change. We don't believe that. Nothing changes. Right? That would be, I guess, a simple answer. Right? But I think, taking the, Genesis to Isaiah chapter 45, verse 7, show them a real translation. Show them the mistranslation. God created evil. Doesn't mean God's evil. Created evil. He allows people to tap in. It's a whole discussion we're not going to get into, but he allows people to tap in. Okay? Doesn't mean they have to. Doesn't mean they should. But the reality is he allows them. If that is the case, if that is the case, then doesn't mean he has free will. Spiritual forces, like any force in the world, except mankind, none of these forces have any free will. Not planets, not stars, not plants, not dirt, not wind, not fire. All these things come under God's, whatever God wants to do with it. He wants to use it for a hurricane, he can. He doesn't, he won't. They don't, they can huff and puff, they can do whatever they want. Doesn't matter. They don't have power. They don't have independent power. And that Pharaoh and others made a mistake and said, well, God created the world, he disappeared, and he gave these other things power. Yeah, but they're worshiping a power. They're not worshiping God. Right? That's idolatry. They're giving something power it doesn't have. So if they're giving something power it doesn't have, right, that's essentially what we're saying here. So you're saying, so a person is saying, not you, but a person is saying, well, Mr. S has free will. He can do what he wants. He doesn't have free will. What do you see an angel has free will? He's a messenger. He can't go outside of who he is. God sets him up to do whatever he wants him to do, right? Give one example. Abraham sees three angels. They're dressed up as Arabs. And why does he see three angels? Because they give messages. One angel was brought to heal him. One was to tell him that he's going to have a child, and the other to overthrow Sodom. Now, what do I understand? Simple explanation, without getting too further. Simple explanation is angels can only do one thing at a time. They're messengers. That's what it is. That's what a malach really means. It's a messenger. A messenger means you're doing what the master said. That means you can't go outside what the master said. Again, that's probably not going to be a good enough answer for them, but that would be a simple answer. Why did Elijah come and teach our sages Torah? So I don't know. There's certain times he was allowed to come. They say that Elijah, disparages the Jewish people, so he has to show up at every circumcision. Some spirit of him shows up at every circumcision, is punished for that, for making a claim against the Jewish people. There were times he was allowed to come back, disguise himself as, let's say, somebody poor or, something else. How come he doesn't come completely? Because he can't. He's not allowed to come back completely. He went up to heaven. That was his choice. He went up to heaven alive. He can't come back. Who says he's allowed to come back? Question is, how is he allowed to come back in different forms and do different things? That's a good question. Right? That's definitely a good question. Right? He comes and goes, but he's not allowed to come back. Why should God allow him to come back a second time? Right? So the prophets say Elijah will come back in full form when he's there to announce the Messiah comes. That's when he'll come back. Otherwise, comes back here and there, maybe to give information or other things, whatever his function is. He'll come back for certain things, but not in full form. Not who he is until the Messiah comes. Right? He decided he went up in a pillar of smoke to heaven. Okay, you're not coming back until the Messiah comes. That was his choice. Made a choice. Why deeper? I have to kill everybody before I give that answer. It's probably Kabbalah 101A. Yeah. How many proper English translations are there? Probably a number of them. A number of good translations. I would stick to Art Scroll. Art Scroll is probably the best. There are other translations, but I think Art Scroll is very good. But I wouldn't say there are too many good ones because they're just not. I remember, like, say the Talmud. There used to be an English translation on Sino, and they said the English was so bad, the Aramaic was easier. So imagine what that's like. So yeah, you stick to Art Scroll, you're good. But how many proper ones are there? I can't answer. Don't know. Someone asked, eating spicy food causing harm to the body, potentially. Yeah, obviously it depends how spicy, but certainly, I think here and there, I think it's fine. I mean, I'm not a world expert on hot, spicy stuff, but I can't imagine it's too good for the body. Someone says there are benefits, but yeah, spicy food, you have to sign a waiver to eat. Yeah, that's probably true. I would think in moderation, probably not so bad, but eat too much of it probably cause problems. On that note, I'm going to stop there. I do this every Tuesday and Thursday, 10 o'clock Eastern time, 5 o'clock Israel time. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Rabbi Chaim Coffman, or be on Orthodox Conversion Judaism. You can send me an email, rabbichaimcoffman@gmail.com, RBBIChaimCoffman@gmail.com. Wish everyone a good beginning of the day, middle of the day, or almost end of the day.